friend. Welcome to the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Emily Cleghorn. This podcast is for mamas navigating childhood trauma while also walking through mamahood. Together, we will empower each other to connect with who we were created to be versus who we were told to be in our trauma. I'm so excited that you've decided to take some time out of your day to join me and tune in. I hope you find this podcast uplifting and empowering. Let's get to it. Hello. Welcome to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I am your host, Emily Cleghorn, and I am so excited that you have taken some time out of your day to join me for this episode. If you're new here, welcome. Today, I am joined by Arielle. I'm not sure how you pronounce your name, but I hope I didn't massacre it too much.
No, you got it. It's Arielle Martone. You got it.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Emily. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. So let's get started simply by having you talk a little bit about your story and what you do and how you serve in the mama space.
Sure. So I am a physical therapist by background. I've been a practicing physical therapist for over 10 years now. I am also a yoga teacher. I've been practicing yoga teacher for, either like 5 or 7, something around that, a while. But it's always been a part of my life. I've been practicing yoga since high school. I've taken courses in college and then, finally got around to taking my yoga teacher training. Like I said, about 5 or 7 years ago now. It kind of blurs. So excuse me for the dates. But yeah, I have been transitioning. So I'm a neuroclinical specialist in physical therapy, and I've been kind of transitioning to more of women's health, pelvic health, prior to having my kids, taking a lot of courses in that, continuing education in that realm. And then after having my 2 kids, which was a process in and of itself, I really needed to shift a little bit more quickly than I was anticipating, as sometimes happens in motherhood. And we can kind of get into that a little bit as we move along. But I had a really hard time having kids in general. So I had to do IVF for both of my babies. And then I had a really rough transition into motherhood, which took me by surprise for several reasons. I think I just wasn't expecting it. And then I really wasn't expecting it as someone who was so excited and really trying to be a mother for as long as I was. Like, it took 4 years until I was able to have my son. But with my daughter, my second, I had a particularly challenging postpartum experience. I had postpartum depression. I had a lot of pelvic pain. And it was navigating through that with my background in physical therapy and kind of knowing what I needed to do to recover and knowing how to navigate the health system and what is all available, which can be a completely overwhelming thing in and of itself. For me, with that background and with that knowledge, it was a challenge and it was a struggle. And that is what really kind of catapulted me into postpartum wellness coaching. Like I said, probably sooner than I was initially ready, because I was still kind of in the throes of it myself as I decided to start my business and transition into coaching. But here I am, and I am very happy with the decision. And, it's something that I think is super, super important and really, really needed. I needed it for myself. And again, that was the whole reason that I jumped into this transition as quickly as I did.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that, because I was in the darkest moments of my first postpartum experience after being hit by the trauma train. And
Mhm.
and making a commitment that when I got out of the hell that I was living in, um, mentally, emotionally, I was going to help mamas who can't find a way. So
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it just feels so important, I think, especially after you've gone through it. And
Mhm.
when you hear a lot of stories of the struggle, but it isn't until after the fact. Like a lot of
Mhm.
times you don't know when somebody is struggling in postpartum until, a year or two down the line when people start to open up about it. Yes, I had this really difficult time,
Mhm.
and I want to change that. I don't want people to, to feel as alone as I felt. I don't want people to feel, as overwhelmed. And
Mhm.
I really wanted to bridge the gap between the physical recovery that I believe is so needed and that I believe that
Mhm.
everybody needs, and the emotional recovery piece that, again, I think is really needed, diagnosis aside. um, I think that both pieces are needed, regardless of if there is a label or a diagnosis on it. I think, the fact that you've had a baby kind of already qualifies you for
Mhm.
needing this recovery time, again, both emotionally, mentally, physically. And so I really wanted to bridge the gap and blend the two together and try to make it a little less overwhelming for mothers and not have to go to a million different places and try to find, piecemeal all of your care together, but really do it in a holistic way that kind of checks all of your boxes.
Yeah, in my experience, the the system that I was I had accessible to me cared for me up to the point I had my child. They cared for my child, and then my care, there there was there was no support. There and to find things that I needed in postpartum in the fourth trimester was near
Mhm.
impossible because I was surviving. And
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
many mamas are in that space. They need help. They know they need help. But in order to find it, it's like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's so hard is admitting that we need help, because we have a lot of expectations around
Mhm.
motherhood and who we're going to be in motherhood, and expectations of doing things right and doing things perfect, and not failing and not needing to show weakness, and to do it all and be the superhero mom that we hear all the time that we need to be, because we can juggle everything and we can do it all, and so we feel like we have to do it all and all by ourselves, and that's just not the case. And it's not true. You need help. it's
It's
it's definitely not a weakness to admit that you need help. um but yeah, admitting that and taking that first step can be really challenging. We have no problem as new moms spending hours on end researching everything about our baby from like the tiniest, oh, my baby has hiccups, is this normal, like, and then we go down a rabbit hole with that, and we will dive into all of their care needs, but we neglect ourselves. And I
Mhm.
feel like we do it in part because we feel like we have to be kind of self-sacrificing, we have to put our baby first. But again, in reality, we have to put ourselves first in order to actually take care of our baby and to really be there for them in a truly supportive way.
Yeah. Um did you ever have the thought, and maybe you did, maybe you didn't, I don't know, that okay, I'm a mom now. I don't matter anymore.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely, I did.
Yes.
I don't know if it was so straightforward like that, that exact phrasing, but the underlining meaning,
Mhm.
absolutely. Um, and that's really hard to
It
swallow.
is.
And again, it's not true, but it's hard not to see it when, again, our care is neglected, and so,
Mhm.
we're not shown the care that we need or the care that we deserve or the support that we deserve, and so much of the emphasis is on the baby and the baby's well-being. And yes, of course, we want to support our baby and we want to do what's best for them and to take care of them, but we can't forget that there's a mother there, and that, the baby and the mother kind of, for those first 3 months especially, like, they exist as one.
Mhm.
And so if we're forgetting the piece of the mother, whether it's that internal piece that, like, I don't really matter anymore, all of my focus has to shift here, or whether it's coming from, the community and society by the way that things are structured, and but even the simple things of, friends and family wanting to come over to see the baby, well-meaning or not, it can easily feel like you don't matter and that you're kind of just there, early on postpartum. And again, that's not true. Like, you very much matter in those early days, especially to your baby. And we have to kind of start shifting that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. So as the postpartum journey goes, you come home with your beautiful little baby that maybe it's taken you a long time to get there. Maybe there was some bumps along the way of getting there, and it's like overnight you go from an individual who has wants and needs and hobbies and all of these things, and now you're home from the hospital and you're Junior's mom and
Yeah.
all of that
And
other
you're
stuff.
different.
Your body's changed. You are beyond tired. And now you don't have time for your hobbies. And your friends treat you differently. Your family treats you differently. Your life has shifted massively in such a short period of time. And that can be hard.
Yeah, absolutely. It is pretty much the biggest transition that we go through as women, is that transition into motherhood. We go through more changes than we do, during puberty. Our brain changes, our body physically changes, our hormones are shifting a ton. And all of that in and of itself is really hard. And then you add on the social aspects of it, that, whether you are taking just the 6 weeks to be home with baby, if you have that, or you're taking an extended maternity leave, you're pausing your career or what you were formally identifying as for,
Mhm.
for some period of time, again, whatever that time might be for you. And that is a transition, especially if you are, taking a little bit longer of a leave. Even the 3 months can feel like a really long time when we tie so much of our identity to what we can do and what we can produce, and who we are in a career path. And that kind of gets shaken up a little bit in motherhood when we are home for a while, with our baby, and kind of readjusting to that. Plus, we're learning and becoming part of this completely brand new relationship. So, when you add any new relationship into a dynamic, things shift. Whether it's a new friend that you met as you move to a new location, and things kind of readjust. But this is this is a very intimate new relationship, and so you're learning this new baby, you're adjusting to that relationship, then your relationship with your partner is going to go through some adjustments that I don't think anybody is prepared for or even
Mm-mm.
realizes. And that kind of ripples out. Your relationships with everybody changes a little bit. And some of those changes are permanent shifts and some are not. But I think we need to be prepared for that, and to be accepting of it a little bit, and to know that, while you're still the same person, if you are only identifying yourself as like what you did and what you were producing, then that time in postpartum can be a really big challenge.
Yeah, it can. And depending on the conversations that you've had with your significant other about who's going to fulfill what roles, if there's open communication, there it can it can be a lot to digest and work through and figure it out. Um, I know here in Canada, we have 12-month or 18-month maternity leaves. And um, I know for me, when I had my daughter and I was on my year off, on my
Yeah.
12-month
Yes.
maternity leave,
That
I would
vacation
go,
you had. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I would go to the school I was teaching at to have lunch with my coworkers so that I would have somebody to talk to while I ate my lunch. It can be very lonely.
It can. Yes, absolutely. And that sounds like a dream, to be honest, the 12 or 18 months. But you're right. You do need to. And I think that's amazing that you did that and you were able to do that, have lunch with your coworkers. I think that's honestly fantastic. Um, but you're right, because it is very isolating and we feel alone, even though we're not, because everyone going through postpartum, it seems to be a very universal experience. No matter who I talk with, the same things kind of come up over and over again. It's that feeling of being isolated, the feeling of just being exhausted and being overwhelmed, and the feeling that you can't really ask for help, you don't know where to turn for help, and that you don't really know who you are for a particular period of time. You feel
Mm-hmm.
foreign in your body. You're like, what just happened to me? And it takes some adjusting. And I think that it's time, again, in my biased opinion, it's time that we start being really proactive in that time, as opposed to being passive and reactive and just kind of taking it and expecting that it's going to be a struggle. And we've kind of really normalize a lot of that. And I think that while we don't want to feel alone and we want to know that other people are feeling the same way, I feel like when we normalize things too much, then it kind of stops people from seeking help, because they just kind of chalk it up to like, oh, this is mom life now. And
Mm.
this is just how it's going to be for a while. And I feel like it's really easy to then get stuck there and to not
Yeah.
really move through it. And then it's going to take a lot longer. Clearly, postpartum is more than 6 weeks. In the US, you're lucky if you get 6 weeks. You have your checkup at 6 weeks, and that is usually the first and the last time that you're really kind of following up with your OB in regards, or midwife, whomever you're working with, in regards to your postpartum care, which is just, it's just baffling, that is it. Because, even for us in America, the American College of Gynecology, they recommend 12 weeks of postpartum care and follow up. But that, again, that's not what we get. We generally get that
That's
6-week checkup, and then that is it. So I don't know if that is similar for you guys as well. I know you have a longer maternity leave, but I feel like
yeah.
the
Yeah.
physical care is not that
The
different.
we get the
Um,
6-week checkup, and um it's essentially just questions. How are you doing? Um
mhm.
just a conversation. And a brief one at that.
Yeah.
Um yeah, there needs to be more education, more awareness, more care, um, and
Hmm.
less gaslighting and manipulating around the challenges of
Oh,
motherhood.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's kind of easy to gaslight ourselves as new moms
Mm-hmm.
with, feeling exhausted and, with the physical changes that we're feeling, having, pelvic pain or any type of discomfort. It's easy for us to say like, oh, it's not that bad. Or of course I feel like this, again, this is just mom life now. I'm going to be tired. But no, there's a ton of reasons that you can be tired or, exhausted in postpartum that again are not normal. If your iron levels are really low because you had a lot of post-op, I'm thinking if you had a cesarean, but if you had a lot of bleeding after having your baby, whether it was, excessive vaginal bleeding from, a vaginal delivery or post-op bleeding from a cesarean, if you've had excessive amounts of blood loss for whichever reason, that can lead to feeling really fatigued. And, same with if you're if you're not eating enough calories because we feel like, oh, I've had my baby, I'm not eating for two anymore, which, is never really true.
Yeah.
But now we are trying to cut our calories or trying to get back to our pre-baby weight really quickly because we
Mm-hmm.
have these unrealistic expectations that that's just what's supposed to happen. And so you're not eating enough, you're now in a state of depletion
Mm-hmm.
on top of being, just tired from postpartum. And so when we just say that new mom life, you're going to be tired, yes. And also let's look into the reasons as to why you are so tired and can we do anything about it. And that's true for everything, whether it's the exhaustion piece or it's the physical discomfort. If you're having a lot of back pain, sure, it could be because you are feeding your baby all the time, whether it's breastfeeding or bottle feeding, and you're so in this rounded position all day long and carrying your baby. But also there are things that we can do about it so that you don't have to be so uncomfortable. So I think we have to
Yeah.
stop gaslighting ourselves first. But yes,
Yeah.
also in at large in society and with our very quick well checks at the 6 week mark, we need to be careful about that and be, not be afraid to speak up about what is going on. And to know that postpartum, again, it's longer than those 6 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Studies and researchers coming out saying like 5 to 7 years, or really
Yeah.
anywhere from 2 to 7 years. But again, like, does it have to be that long, or is it that long because we're neglecting the needs that we actually have and we're not doing any of the proactive care that we need to allow our bodies to heal and rebuild and to provide ourselves with the actual emotional support that we need to, again, heal, because a lot is brought
Mm-hmm.
up in postpartum,
Oh,
whether
so
it's,
much.
from the birth process itself, or
Mm-hmm.
you're all of a sudden you're triggered into all of
Your
things
childhood?
that happened in the past. Yeah. Absolutely. um so so you have to be proactive, I think, on all of those fronts and really working on them together to move through it so that it doesn't take 7 years, because that's almost a decade. That is a huge amount of time to not feel like yourself. So I don't know, I
Well,
don't want to wait that long.
yeah, I mean, when a kid is 7 years old, they're in like second grade. Like, and you're still
Yeah.
healing from them being born. Um, so what
Yeah.
tips or tricks or strategies do you have that you recommend for mamas to um, find their identity again and
Yeah.
navigate postpartum with more ease?
Sure. So I mean, it's a huge process, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think I think again, it's really important to blend the emotional aspect of not knowing who you are with the physical aspect. Because if we're not feeling like ourselves in our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
physically in our bodies, they feel foreign. We're like, why do I still feel squishy? Why does everything ache and I can't move like I was able to move before? Going up the stairs is a challenge now, whereas like I didn't have to think about it before. It's really hard to feel like yourself when you're feeling like that physically. And then vice versa, if we're feeling really, down or really anxious, it's hard to then shift the focus back into how our body is feeling physically and put the effort into getting it back into kind of the right things back into the right places, if you will, because it takes a little bit of time and it takes some
Mm-hmm.
attention. And if we're not emotionally feeling ready or sometimes even feeling worthy to put that time and care in, then we're not going to do it. So I think, step one is really setting your expectations and knowing, like, if you didn't have a baby, kind of preparing now
Mm-hmm.
that things are going to change and that it is going to be a really big shift. And if you did have a baby already, kind of resetting your expectations and seeing where you are at. And so that kind of, takes me into like the process that I go through of really identifying, integrating, and then igniting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really identifying where you are. So if we're talking about, you know, feeling like yourself again, or kind of like finding your way again, is how I kind of phrase it, because you can feel so lost. Um, is to identify like what is going on. Like, take some time to write things down. Journaling was
Mm-hmm.
a huge piece of what I do. I find it to be really helpful tool and really important to kind of see what's going on. So,
Yeah.
write down like who you thought you were before and then kind of where you're at now. See what's overlying and start to shift away from identifying yourself as what you do. And that's even
Yeah.
your role as mother. So
Yeah.
whether it's, me, I was a full-time physical therapist before. So shifting out of that role and not just jumping into the role of like, okay, I'm not a physical therapist now. I'm a mom. I'm a full-time, stay-at-home mom, or however you would want to phrase it, for my son for a period of time, is to kind of go a little bit deeper, go a layer deeper, and see like what's underlying that. So like, what got you into the role that you were doing before, and how do you see yourself as a mother? Like, what are the characteristics that you're looking for, and jot those down and start to identify yourself with those characteristics as opposed to the titles. And that
Mm-hmm.
has been a really big shift, because that doesn't necessarily change.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I got into physical therapy because I am, a huge believer that movement is medicine, and that, proactive care is way way better than reactive care, in my personal opinion. Of course, that's not, it's not always going to be the case. Sometimes we do have to react to what we get thrown. Um, but those underlying values, that's who I am. And that also is reflected in how I am as a mother. I'm a physical mom. Like, well, I'll wrestle with my babies. Even when they were like really tiny, I would do a lot of floor time and different activities that way. Whereas someone else might be a little bit more, in the artistic realm, and they can identify in things that way, and so then they might be more like crafting, or different things like that. So it's just kind of shifting the perspective as to, again, just away from the titles and more to like what's underlying those titles and what's really there. And I think that can be a really big first step. And then from there, it's really working on integrating, the emotional aspects that you're feeling with the physical aspects, and trying to kind of start to tie them together, and start to really be more present in your body, but also with the day to day. And that can be a really big key to kind of shifting out of that lost feeling.
Yeah. That's Journaling has been huge for me. Um, Not so much in postpartum, but in healing my trauma. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
huge tool that you can use for many different purposes. Um, so um, yeah, if writing in like pen and paper doesn't feel safe for you, use a password protected app on your phone, or use a password protected something on your computer. Um, there are many different ways to journal. It
Yes.
doesn't just have to be one particular way. How I do it and how you do it may be different, and that's okay. Um, the the goal
Yeah,
is
I
to
think that's such an important piece that you just mentioned.
yeah, the goal is to
So
just let
sorry, I
things
did not mean
out.
to talk over you.
Oh, no, no worries,
Yeah.
no worries.
No,
How can
no, but I was going to say
people?
the password protection piece is Sorry, I think there's a delay. The password protection piece I think is huge because for me, I know that that was a barrier. And, I have a very trusting relationship with my husband, but that was initially a barrier to starting to write. And I think it goes back to having a journal as a really young child and then in high school. And, on two different instances, I've had people read them, two different people, and it feels really violating when that happens. And, now it is a tool that I use a lot, not every day anymore, but when I was in postpartum, it was an everyday thing. And like I said, I do have a trusting relationship with my husband where now I can, I leave it on the counter all over the place. And I know he's not reading it because we have that level of trust, but getting to that point, that took a little bit of work too, of being like, no, this is safe. I can do that. But I didn't even think at the time, like a password protected something, app or something. I think that's great.
So how can people connect with you further if they want to connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I hang out mostly on Instagram as far as the socials go, and that is just my name, Arielle Martone. And I do have some free resources that you can find there. And the two resources that I have right now are how to feel less tired and less exhausted without sleep training your baby. So it addresses some of the many different reasons why you might feel exhausted, not just the lack of sleep. So it's kind of diving into that and really, again, taking that look into why are you feeling this way, and then what can we do about it? Because it comes back to, again, making the changes for yourself and taking action and not just brushing it off and gaslighting yourself and saying being tired is part of mom life. And also, I have a great free resource that is more specifically focused towards, pelvic health and pelvic healing in those early days. And it's kind of a pelvic floor recovery guide that has nine different tips in it, and a lot of information on things that you can do to really start the healing process for yourself and what to look for.
Awesome. Yeah, it was not until after my son, after having two babies in 17 and a half months, that I realized how important pelvic floor health is. So, yeah, very important, friends. Very, very important. Thank you so much for joining me on the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. It was great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. If you resonated with what you heard, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share it with a friend who would also benefit, because we rise together. Until next time, Mama, keep shining.